The sun rose brightly over the small fishing village, nestled along the shores of Lake Azumini. The villagers were just beginning to stir, the fishermen preparing their nets and boats to head out for the day's catch, while the women cooked breakfast for their families. Okechukwu finished patching the small hole in his fishing net and walked down to the shore to meet his brother Ifeanyi. Together, they pushed their wooden boat out into the still waters as the first rays of light danced across the lake. "I have a good feeling about today," Okechukwu said as they rowed out. "I think we will get a big catch." The two brothers enjoyed fishing together. It was peaceful and calm being out on the open waters. Soon they came across a large school of fish and cast their nets. When they tried to reel in the nets, they felt an unusually heavy load. "We've hit the jackpot today," Ifeanyi exclaimed excitedly. The two strained and pulled with all their might. As the nets emerged, they saw a giant figure tangled within, flashing iridescent scales in the morning sun. It was a mermaid, and she was dead. The brothers gaped at the mythical creature lying lifeless in their boat. She had the torso and face of a woman, but instead of legs, she had a long, gleaming fish tail. Her eyes were closed and her long black hair floated eerily around her. Strange markings decorated her wrists and neck. "What should we do?" Okechukwu whispered, sounding scared. Mermaids were magical beings rarely seen by humans. Legend said calamity came to any who captured or killed one. "We must return her to the lake," Ifeanyi said, firm yet uneasy. With trembling hands, the two freed her body from the net and gently lowered her back into the dark waters, watching the glow of her tail dissolve into the depths. They turned their boat hastily back toward the village, hearts thumping. Neither brother spoke of what they had seen, fearful of the curse that now loomed over their home. A haunting cry echoed across the lake as they rowed away. Over the next few days, life carried on as normal in the village. The two brothers continued fishing, avoiding the area where they had spotted the mermaid. The women tended their homes, prepared meals, and carried out chores without incident. Then, 1 week later, on a sunny afternoon, two young girls laughed and played by the lakeshore after finishing their laundry. In the shimmering waters, they spotted a beautiful fish scale that gleamed iridescent colors in the sunlight. "How lovely!" exclaimed Maita as she reached to retrieve it. She and her sister Amaka often collected interesting items they found to decorate their home. Maita placed the scale gently into her pocket, and the two girls carried their laundry back to the village, unaware of the curses unleashed by the dead mermaid's scale touching a mortal girl's skin. The next morning, Maita awoke feeling strange cramps in her legs. As she pulled herself from bed, she cried out in horror. Overnight, her legs had fused into a single limb, tapering into a fish's tail covered in gleaming silver scales. She flopped to the floor while strange impulses and a yearning she couldn't understand overtook her. Hearing her daughter's screams, Maita's mother rushed into the room. She froze at the doorway with a look of shock and fear. "My child, what is this curse upon you?" she exclaimed. Neighbors started gathering outside their home, muttering wildly at the news of the strange transformation overtaking young Maita. Before long, another blood-curdling scream was heard nearby. A young woman named Ijeoma emerged from her home doubled over. Right before the villagers' eyes, her legs too began to fuse together into a powerful fish's tail, shimmering with sapphire blue scales in the sunlight. Chaos erupted throughout the village. Several more girls soon underwent the same unnatural transformation. All of those afflicted had swum in Lake Azumini recently. Panic swept through the village like wildfire. The chief immediately issued an emergency order. No one was allowed to go near or swim in the lake until further notice. Guards took shifts day and night to patrol the shores and keep terrified villagers away from its suddenly threatening waters. But the strange plague only worsened over the coming days. Nearly every girl or woman who had bathed, washed clothes near, or drank from the Great Lake was now cursed to become one of the part human, part fish creatures of local myth. The mermaid maidens still lived in their village homes, but could no longer live as normal humans. They flopped along the ground awkwardly with their powerful tails, or dragged themselves painfully on newly formed fins. While their human halves still felt similar desires and emotions, powerful primal urgings like hunger for seafood and longing for water, overcame their senses for hours at a time. At the lake's edge, the guards looked on in horror as ripples betrayed the presence of more mermaids congregating beneath its waters. Their occasional glimpses of bobbing heads or glittering scales left them trembling and alert. Soon, even direr news reached the village. One of the guards had gone missing overnight from his shift patrolling the lake. Search parties arranged to comb the nearby woods, and ravines turned up no sign of him. 3 nights later, a bloodied leg bone surfaced along the lake's shore, leaving the villagers in no doubt of the mermaid's first mortal victim. Now, in a desperate bid to save the last of their women not yet transformed by the mermaid curse, the men kept them confined to their homes under close guard. Others, still healthy, labored to shuttle food and water to the imprisoned mermaid women from the village's central well, which was blessed by the gods to remain pure. But even as this safeguard slowed the plague, new horrors visited the village each night. Mermaids surfaced in the dark of night, bewitching minds and luring more victims to the lake through eerie songs. More guards disappeared, only to wash ashore days later with scraps of flesh stripped from their bones. Death had come to dwell in Lake Azumini, and the entire village trembled at night beneath the shrieking cries echoing over its grapevine-choked shores. Day by day, the village shrank and withered. With most of the womenfolk now fearsome mermaids confined indoors, the remaining men struggled to care for their families alone while protecting their village from the nightly horrors. Food rotted in pantries faster than the dozen able-bodied men left could consume it. Children wailed from hunger as their despairing fathers struggled to provide even clean water. Meanwhile, Okechukwu and Ifeanyi redoubled their efforts to spear or net enough fish from a smaller lake on the village's opposite side to keep starvation at bay. But this supply was meager, and try as the brothers might to hide it, the mermaid's curse had come for this lake as well. Bobbing heads and unearthly wails beneath the still waters by moonlight betrayed its corruption by mermaids. Soon even small groups of children vanished from the fields while gathering berries or working the few crops that still grew. Their tiny bones would float to the surface days later, picked clean of flesh. Mermaid attacks now came on any who dared the shoreline by day or the water's edge by night. At long last, in desperation, Okechukwu and Ifeanyi approached the withered old priest who tended the village's tiny shrine, seldom visited these days. "Please help us lift the mermaid's curse," the brothers begged the wizened little man, whose wrinkled face held generations of accumulated knowledge. "Have compassion on us. Already so many are dead, and soon none of us will be left alive." The old priest sighed, stroking his wispy white beard for long minutes before responding. At last he lifted his eyes to the brothers and spoke. "These mermaids dwell in both lakes now, and their bloodlust cannot be contained or controlled. Even my most potent charms and wards will only aggravate their attacks." Okechukwu opened his mouth to object in dismay, but the priest raised one knobby hand. "Listen first, young fisherman. Where one curse dwells, a second may undo it." He eyed each brother sharply in turn. "You must return to the very place where you first encountered calamity in the depths of Lake Azumini. There, seek out the most ancient creature that dwells in its stones and sediment, and beseech the catfish elder for deliverance." The old priest spoke of a catfish of monstrous proportions, said to lurk in Lake Azumini's shadowy depths. Local legend said this whiskered giant had dwelt there since the earliest days of creation, granting boons to mortals pure of heart when it surfaced. But its aid came at a cost. Having nothing left to lose, the next dawn, Okechukwu and Ifeanyi rowed their boat back across blood-stained waters beneath the shrieks of hungry mermaids. As they pulled their oars, ripples hinted at darting shapes trailing just out of sight beneath the boat's hull. When they reached the area where they had found the mermaid, the two dropped their anchor stone and steeled their courage. Okechukwu raised his hands to the heavens as Ifeanyi steadied them both against the boat's rocking. "O great catfish elder of the lake, hear our plea," Okechukwu shouted over the water. "Have mercy and lift this plague upon our village." Only ominous silence answered as the lake briefly stilled to glass around their boat. Suddenly, massive bubbles erupted at the water's edge. there surfaced a monolithic shape, the titanic, whiskered head of the most enormous catfish the world had seen. It gazed at the two tiny humans with one ancient milky eye. Fear gripped the brothers' hearts at the sight of its bristling, sharp-toothed maw. More ripples hinted at its giant body, coiling away into the black depths below their boat. In a voice like stones grinding beneath the lake bed, the catfish elder spoke. "I warned that mermaid long ago to avoid contact with mortal men, lest dire consequences follow." It fixed the two men with its pale stare. "And yet by your own hands she met her end, fisherman. Thus her curse and your village's woes." Ifeanyi trembled but found his voice. "O honored catfish elder, we meant no harm. We returned her to the lake, yet still this plague persists. Can you not help us?" Tendrils of algae trailed from its gaping mouth and nodding chin barbels as the immense catfish considered. Okechukwu squeezed the boat's edge with whitened knuckles awaiting its reply. Perhaps," it rumbled. "My closest kin and I may be able to purge these waters of the curse first unleashed here by that mermaid's dying screams. But lifting such grief from both lakes and coaxing back the light of peace will require great effort." It fixed them both with the full weight of its monstrous presence through the depths. "And all magic demands sacrifice. Are you prepared to pay such a cost, fisherman?" The brothers locked eyes with each other, steely with resolve. "We will pay any price that spares the rest of our village," said Okechukwu. Ifeanyi nodded grimly at his side. The brothers sat frozen as the terrible choice weighed upon them. Down in the village, all who remained suffered still under threat of starvation, or worse fates beneath the mermaid's shrieks. Only the catfish elder's intervention could lift the curse, but at one of their lives as cost. At long last, Ifeanyi stirred. "Brother, let me make this sacrifice," he said softly. "It is by your net that we both drew her up from these waters. Allow me to make things right so that you may carry on." Okechukwu opened his mouth to protest, but Ifeanyi stopped him with an upraised hand. His face shone with sad resolve. Slowly he drew a fish knife from his belt and raised the blade to his jugular. His hands did not shake. "Know that I love you always, my brother. Tell all our people what transpired here so that things may be set right." With that, Ifeanyi drew the knife across his throat in one clean motion. Dark red blood fanned into the placid waters as his body slumped forward. The lake boiled where droplets touched. With a solemn rumble, the giant catfish gave its reply. "Blood pays for blood. Such is the only sacrifice my kind will hear." Its milky gaze shifted beyond the two brothers. "One of you must take his own life now and offer your flesh to recompense the mermaid's demise." It glared at the two from the dark deeps. "Only then will my kin and I perform the necessary rituals to undo this plague upon your waters, and perhaps some souls now lost may return." Frozen in grief, Okechukwu could only stare as the immense catfish rose up, its vast mouth opening to swallow Ifeanyi's remains in one gulp. It sank slowly back into the now crimson waters as Okechukwu screamed anguish across the lake. The sight of his brother's sacrifice burned into his mind. Waves lapped crimson at the sides of the boat through a red haze as Okechukwu wept bitterly into his hands. Slowly he became aware of a deathly stillness falling over the accursed lake. Haunted cries no longer echoed from shore to shore. Even gentle waves faded to absolute calm. Stunned, Okechukwu raised his tear-streaked face. The waters around his drifting boat now swirled with thousands of catfish of all sizes rising silently to the surface. Together, they circled the drifting vessel until Okechukwu sat in the midst of a great leukemic whirlpool. And before his disbelieving eyes, the smaller catfish began to break the surface, dissolving not into spray, but clouds of golden pollen drawn up toward the heavens. The entire lake bloomed gold with flowers, like massive water lilies unfurling across its cursed span, as still more catfish dissolved into golden clouds, ascending skyward on the breeze. Even the mermaids lost their foul bloodlust as the catfish elder's purification ritual played out. Surfacing peacefully amid the blossoms, their ghostly songs now echoed the bittersweet joy of lost souls returning home as they too dissolved into rain and gold. Soon, the entire lake sparkled pure gold and white under a carpet of celestial flowers that whispered promises of